Do 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 do. Hello, me and my big ass microphone thought it would be fun to share some thoughts and opinions about books and politics and other kinds of things, and so that's what I'm trying to do. I hate that. Okay, alright, anyways. The book I wanted to talk about is Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, which I believe came out a few years ago now. I did not read it when it initially came out, so I'm pretty sure I'm pretty far behind on the discourse, but I mean, you know, that's the fun of books, you know, you're getting to read them and experience them on your own kind of time, and when you're ready. This one I think has been on my shelf for a little bit, and I've been meaning to get to it, and then, you know, the powers that be. Finally got around to finishing it. I read it fairly quickly. I think anyone could read it fairly quickly in like a couple days. I think I took more of like a week because, you know, the powers that be. This actually was not the first book that I read by Kuang. The first one I read was the first book of the Poppy War series. I read the first book. I did not finish the series, and you know, this is no like, it's not a knock on her writing. I think her writing is very like tight and coordinated, at least in that book, but the world building I think was really, really intense. There was a lot of learning about the world through dialogue, right, because it's set in a school setting, and so, you know, the kids are learning history or whatever, history and politics of that world, and I don't know, it's just it was like too academic in a way, whereas feeling more like a history book than it was a fiction book, with this sort of like fantastical element kind of thrown in there. I don't know. It wasn't for me. All right. There are people who love the series and swear by it. And listen, I'm not going to yuck your yum. I'm just saying, I don't know if it's for me. That was my sort of impression of Kuang, since that she's a very academic, very tight-knit, constructed, coordinated kind of writer, an intense kind of writer. And so reading Yellowface, it was a very different departure from that. Yellowface, I think, is a little bit more approachable, easier to digest, I think. And this isn't to say that like you have to be like a genius or like a PhD student or whatever to be able to read the Poppy War series. I'm just saying that I find Yellowface a little bit more approachable, even if, you know, it's talking about things that are important, right? But it's a little bit more approachable in the writing style and even in the story. All that to say, I thought it was good overall. I thought it was pretty good. The general summary is that there's two women, Athena Liu and June Hayward, who is the main character of the story, and they've kind of known each other since college. They're quote-unquote friends, but June is very envious of the life that Athena has. You know, she's rich, she's famous, she's an amazing writer who's getting all these book deals and notoriety, and her books are being turned into like series and stuff and yada yada, and June's writing is not really going anywhere, so she's incredibly envious of her. Goes over to her house, freak accident, she dies, and I'm not spoiling anything because this is quite literally on the back of the book, and she sees Athena's manuscript that she was working on for her next book and yoinks it and finishes it, changes up a couple things, and decides to market it as her own. She even does this sort of like name change. She goes from June Hayward to Juniper Song, which is just okay. The book is about the sort of cat and mouse game that she ends up in with herself and with people who are suspicious about her, to, you know, keep up the facade, to keep performing, you know, Yellowface. I think the idea of the manuscript was like, it's like historical fiction that relied on a lot of like, I think like 19th century Chinese history, and June Hayward being a very not Asian person, being a very white American, you know, having to put on airs and to you know, just keep up the facade or whatever. It's very interesting because this book offers a behind the scenes look into what goes on when your favorite books are published, and the sort of dramas that come with that, you know, the editing process, the writing process, the publishing process, just how difficult it really can be. And it is really hard for most people who are at least trying to query a book to get an agent. It takes multiple tries. Getting a book published, getting an agent, that's, you know, that's no small feat. June does have that, but she doesn't have the success that Athena does, and I think that really eats at her. I do think there is some benefit, or can be some benefit, at being a little envious, but I think it's a question of, will you let this drive you forward, or will you let it consume you and just fall into its trap and can't get out. June very much was more of the latter. It's very interesting that in trying to reach the success that Athena has, she has to use her unfinished manuscript to get there. You know, she talks about how she changes some things, she adds some of her own writing, she adds her own ending, her own thoughts, and, you know, her own senses and such. And so it is there. It is very possible for June to reach that kind of success, but maybe deep down she didn't believe in herself enough to get there on her own. I thought that this was the only way, some sort of like cheat code, and it's like, I don't know about that. June does a lot of like mental gymnastics to justify taking Athena's manuscript and trying to play it up and trying to throw the scent off her trail, but being like, I was her best friend, we were so close, and people who are, you know, like saying mean things about me, I'm grieving, and just to try and throw the scent off her trail. And it's I'm sure exhausting, and she definitely sounded exhausted, but you know, it's like, girl, you set yourself up for this. No one told you to do this. You could have just stopped. You could have just not taken her manuscript. You know what I mean? But you did, and so now you gotta see it through. All right, the sunken cost fallacy, as they say. And then you have Athena Lou, who we only interact with for a very short time, you know, before she dies, and the rest of who she is kind of created and understood by everybody else, and June included. We're never close enough to her to know who she is, but I think that in general, and I wonder, you know, if R.F. Kuang intended this, but Athena Lou is very Mary Sue-ish. She's like this gorgeous, tall, amazingly talented, one-of-a-kind kind of writer. She is rich, her books are amazing in all the bookstores and the windows, and she's getting all these deals and stuff, and it's just so kind of like airheaded and, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening to me. It's very Mary Sue-ish, and I wonder if that was the intention, to kind of make her almost insufferable. But then there's a part of me that wonders like if she was actually like that, or if that was just June's understanding of her, June's sort of experience of Athena. I don't know, because we're never close enough to her to know that, and maybe that's not the point of the book, right? But she was very Mary Sue-ish, and I think in being so close to June, we get moments of how June was talking about her experiences with Athena and what she was like and what she wasn't like, that I think was trying to turn her into a villain so that we could sympathize with June more. Sure, maybe. How reliable of a narrator are you, sis? You just plagiarize your dead friends' like manuscripts. Like, that kind of ends up being the point and the purpose of a Mary Sue, right? To be this impenetrable, perfect person that makes the other characters, or even the main character, feel better about themselves. You end up rooting for them and sympathizing with them more. But it's like, it's kind of hard to do that with June, because it's like, you're not a good person. You know what I mean? In general, I try not to be like so definitive about, you know, what constitutes a good and a bad person. I think there are some things that are just like, okay, objectively. And in this book, it's like, okay, sis, like, you're definitely not a good person. And funny enough, I do think that whether we want to admit it or not, I think there are more of us that are a lot closer to June than we are probably to Athena, whether that be in terms of talent or even just how we're able to move with our envy, or, you know, that we have felt those things at some point or another. And I don't think most people would have gone as far as June did, but you know. R.F. Kuang, I saw a clip of an interview that she was doing, and she talked about how she wrote Yellowface during the pandemic, and at the height of all the like Twitter, when it was still Twitter, all the writers beefing with each other and with their audiences being like, you're canceled, you're fake, you're this, you're that, blah, 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 blah. And she mentioned that this book was written in a way to sort of mimic that, which I think is true, which I definitely think is the case. Obviously, with the book being called Yellowface, there brings an interesting question or interesting thoughts in mind about the racial politics going on in here. You know, Asian Americans are considered to be the quote-unquote model minority, the example of a good minority that has come as a way to further divide the solidarity between all non-white peoples, and namely to be a major, you know, comparison tool to Black people. It makes me think about how there is a little bit of a belief, weirdly enough, that if you want your manuscript to go anywhere, or if you want to see the kind of success that Athena Lou does in this book, then you need to be someone who's not white. Unfortunately, I do think that some people, even today, still hold about the publishing world that, like, if you're a brown person, a black person, you know, queries an agent or something, that your manuscript is automatically going to get accepted. And I'm like, in what world? I would love to see it. That's definitely not the case. Non-whiteness is perceived as this, like, quote unquote meal ticket to becoming a super successful, super famous, super rich writer. And that's just not the case. And I think that also kind of speaks to June, a little bit of June's envy, whether she wants to admit it or not. She's just another white woman, you know, that feels that she is entitled to the kind of success that Athena Liu is getting, because I think they went to the same colleges, they were in the same circles, they've been, you know, in the same kind of profession. Why isn't she experiencing the fame and the notoriety and the praise that Athena Liu is? You know, why is it such a big deal if she changes her name from June Hayward to Juniper Song? And it's like, girl, there's a moment in the book where I think she's giving a talk, or she's like at a school or something. I think she might be giving a talk. She pronounces the last name of one of the participants there wrong. And they're like, oh, we would have thought you would have been able to pronounce that, but okay. And it's like, it's moments like that where it's like, see, you're full of shit. This is like built on very, very shaky foundation. And it was from the beginning, right? Because it's not your manuscript, it's not your writing. What are you doing? She decided to stick it through to the end, and I won't spoil the ending, but I will say I don't think it was my favorite. I thought it was kind of okay. I thought it was kind of cyclical and going back into like the start of more drama and more drama and more drama. I'm sure, you know, that's a little bit of Kwang's point, right? There is all this kind of unnecessary drama in the publishing and writing world, and that might well and be the case. But my thing is, like, you could just not. You don't have to be involved in that. And the only reason you are involved in that is because you're taking ideas that aren't your own. By the end of things, I don't know if we really experience any kind of major character growth. And maybe that's also not the point. I wouldn't say that June is a particularly likable character. There is a certain point in the book where you wonder is this going to work? And I've had that question in the back of my head with each page, like, is this going to work? Is this going to work? And there was a like uncomfortable kind of tension reading the whole thing by page, because there's something good or people are reacting well, and then there's something bad that pops up, and there's something good, something bad, and a lot of swinging between everything's fine to, oh shit, everyone's gonna find out I'm a fraud in a couple of seconds. So I do think in that instance it was well done. So yeah, all that to say, it was pretty good. Thought it was a decent read. I'd give it a 4 out of 5. I thought the meta commentary around the publishing world, around the racial politics of it, I thought that was interesting. I thought the characters were interesting. I think it is hard to write just a general sort of unlikable character, let alone an unlikable woman, without it sounding like it was written by a man. You know what I mean? I thought the characters were interesting, even if they did get kind of tropey at times. Like, there's a little bit of absurdity to it, but maybe that's the point. I don't know. And yeah, that's what I think. Let me know what you think. If you read it, did you like it? Would you score it higher, lower? Any other sort of angles, opinions that you have about it? Let me know. Very interested to hear. And I'll end this with my favorite quote from the book. It goes, "Writing is the closest thing we have to real magic. Writing is creating something out of nothing, is opening doors to other lands. Writing gives you power to shape your own world when the real one hurts too much. To stop writing would kill me." I really like that line. I need to figure out how to end this thing on a way that's like decent, but yeah. I hope this was helpful. I hope you at least enjoyed it, that I appeared entertaining. I hope. I don't know. This is the first video I'm doing. This is just awkward as fuck. I hope you have slept well. Hope you're hydrated, have eaten, had a good meal. And if your elbows are ashy, go put lotion on right now.